the one thing that even I agree with as a youngster myself is the fact that the youth of today wants innovation. भले ही हम लोग लिटरेचर की बात कर रहे हो, भले ही हम लोग टेक्नोलॉजी की बात कर रहे हो,
कहीं भी हो सकता है.
I authored my debut novel when I was 16 years old. My first TED Talk event was scheduled right in between of my chemistry board's examination and my physics board's examination.
An example where you kind of got inspired and it showed up clearly.
Game of Thrones.
Okay,
I can give you an answer for it. Blisters of the Battle is a book which, of course, inspired by so many wars and battles that we have seen in our history that we're aware of. And of course, many of which might be fought in the future as well.
Hello and welcome to the Booknerds Podcast, another exciting episode. And we have with us Yash Tiwari, who is an author, speaker. He is an ace guy at, TED Talks and Josh Talks. Great work going, Yash. And welcome to the Booknerds Podcast. Of course, we'll be talking about a particular book today as well, Blisters of the Battle.
Yes.
And, a lot more, because I really wanted to dive deep into things which you understand very well.
Sure.
The youth of this country, and they are the maximum in numbers.
Of course.
How do they read? How do they write? How do they behave? What do they want in life?
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for being here and taking time out. How are you feeling today?
Very pumped up.
Okay.
Seriously, really excited because of everything that you have mentioned so far. हम लोग books के बारे में बात करने वाले हैं, हम लोग youngsters के बारे में बात करने वाले हैं, and these are just some of the topics that I'm always very delighted to be talking about. And as a youngster myself, it is always a joy to guide and mentor the aspiring authors, the budding authors of our future, who are also going to basically develop that world of the future too. तो बहुत ही खुशी होती है जब भी हम लोग यंगस्टर्स को लेकर बात करते हैं, स्पेसिफिकली लिटरेचर और यंगस्टर्स को जब हम रिलेट करते हैं. आई गेस दैट इज व्हाट वी आर गोइंग टू बी प्राइमरली फोकसिंग ऑन इन दिस कन्वर्सेशन, एंड ऑफ कोर्स द बुक एज वेल एज यू मेंशन्ड, ब्लिस्टर्स ऑफ द बैटल.
Yes. So let me talk to you about the thing that you're most passionate about, and it comes across, kind of in your online persona as well.
Sure.
You speak a lot at events. You interact with so many, young people.
Yeah.
Gen Z, whatever you call it. I mean, I am not in your bracket, but I'm a millennial. They call it a millennial. But,
yes.
What are the things that you feel are important to them? Okay, because, sometimes we don't understand. Like, we kind of dismiss them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know, they don't know anything.
Yeah.
They are not maybe disciplined enough. What is the kind of feedback you get from interacting with all these people? And
Sure.
later on during the day, you are going to another event in Delhi University.
Of course.
So tell us about that, because we want to really get a sense of that, and we'll talk about other things.
Absolutely. So when we are talking about the youngsters, and this is something which I'm speaking from my personal experience of being a speaker and a global youth mentor, delivering sessions and workshops internationally on various platforms, primarily focused on the youngsters. So when I interact with them, when I get to know more about them, the one thing that even I agree with as a youngster myself is the fact that the youth of today wants innovation.
Okay.
More than anything else, they want to be innovative. They want to be innovative. They want to see that innovation in the world. भले ही हम लोग लिटरेचर की बात कर रहे हो, भले ही हम लोग टेक्नोलॉजी की बात कर रहे हो,
कहीं भी हो सकता है.
कहीं भी हो सकता है. Even cooking को ही आप ले लीजिए. They want to do it differently. And I don't think it is because they are harsh about the past. कई बार ऐसा हम लोग का पर्सपेक्टिव होता है that the youngsters are very much dismissive of how their history has been or how their past has been, but that is not always the case. It can be the case sometimes, but majority of the youngsters, they respect their roots. They genuinely do. They want to learn from the same, but they want to learn more about how they can go further. वो रुकना नहीं चाहते, वो थमना नहीं चाहते, जैसा कि कई मूवीज के डायलॉग्स भी होते हैं कि आज के यंगस्टर्स आगे बढ़ना चाहते हैं, which is a fact. It is not something which I'm stating just philosophically for the sake of it. It is a fact that the youngsters want to do things, but they want to do it differently. And I think that is where at times जो हम लोग को generational conflict देखने को मिलता है, because even though the goal might be the same, but different generations have different I guess methods or perspectives of viewing those methods, और कहीं ना कहीं communication gap भी बहुत ज़्यादा इसी कारण बढ़ जाता है, because youngsters have their own language entirely, and that is what it becomes. That gap, that I guess breakage, and eventually हम लोग कहीं ना कहीं youngsters को ही question करने लगते हैं in terms of how disciplined they might be or how even passionate they might be, which I can assure you as a youngster myself, we have a lot of passion, we have a lot of drive, बस थोड़े से encouragement की ज़रूरत है.
Awesome. Let's go to the books, because it was very interesting that you have been doing a lot of things. But books was something I never expected, because we have been connected for a while. I never expected you to write a book or something like that. What was the reason, first of all, to kind of delve into this? Because it's not perhaps that cool to do it.
For me it is. For you it absolutely is.
In the general sense, people might just become online influencers right now, or just YouTube creators. But choosing a book to add to this, kind of persona and what you have created for yourself, and to tell us more about that, and how it started, kind of.
Certainly. The journey, basically.
Yes.
So, to be very honest, I wouldn't consider writing books or literature as an addition to who I am. It is basically the starting point of it all. Because I authored my debut novel when I was 16 years old. That wasn't very long ago. I'm just 21 right now. It was just a few years back. But
I completely forgot about your age, by the way.
It's 21.
I'm talking about to someone who is very experienced. I had no clue. I just forgot about it.
So the thing is कि I was 16. I was basically finishing off with my 11th standard. 12th शुरू होने वाले थे. And हमारी country में तो 12th का आपको प्रेशर पता ही है कितना ज्यादा होता है. And I was a science student, by the way. I was a biology student, so the pressure was sky high. And I was aware of the fact कि एक बार अगर स्कूल शुरू होता है, I will be absolutely invested in the studies only. So I took a call for me and I said कि before this 12th standard starts, I want to do something in the field of my passion. Now, taking you a little further in the past, I used to write these short stories and poetries and stuff like that, even when I was just 6, 7, 8 years old, like that. And my parents, by the way, used to upload it on an online blog. Back then, I wasn't even aware what an online blog was, but they were doing that. And
that's why I wanted to know, because see, I'm a parent, and parents have to play a part.
Exactly.
So they did encourage you.
In the journey ahead, I'll be talking about their part most specifically. So what happened ki I authored my debut novel. I wrote it within just 22 days actually. So anyway, it went on to get a lot 22 days. It went on to get a lot of acclaims and awards and appreciation, primarily because there was this 16-year-old guy who was writing a book in a very brief period of time. And by the way, disclaimer, it is not a recommendation that I have for anybody. When I'm teaching about writing books or writing stories, I ask कि भैया decades भी लग जाए, do it. You have to invest the proper amount of time that is required. But anyway, that is how it was for me.
But it just worked for you.
Exactly, because I was just doing that. During that while, I was just writing only primarily. So anyway.
Because I wanted to compare this to, maybe a Kevin Missal, who kind of is very prolific again.
Of course.
And people, sort of, we are mentioning him on the podcast, but maybe Kevin can come in next.
Sure.
Anyways, but with Kevin also, he's like very prolific, and a lot of people question him कि यार इतनी जल्दी कैसे लिख रहे हो, खुद भी लिख रहे हो कि नहीं लिख रहे हो, मतलब all these comments I have seen online. But I guess the process works
exactly, because right? I always state this in my interviews and whenever I'm talking or writing about it, that when I'm writing a book, that is what I'm thinking about while I'm eating, while I'm sleeping, while I'm talking, while I'm studying or working or anything else. So I think that's sort of a passionate dedication towards my work that basically, shortens the time period as well. So anyway, coming back to the book itself, it was a celebration in tribulation. That is where the journey started. And that was when I was invited for my first TED Talk as well. And wahin se journey shuru hui hai.
I mean, it's incredible because, with TED Talks, whatever I have also experienced kind of, and, there is a fear.
Of course.
Associated with it.
Sure.
Because to get on that platform, first of all, at the age of...
I was 17 by the time 17. I was on the platform.
Okay, 17. Okay, most of us don't figure out anything at 16, 17. We are just worried about, passing exams or whatever, and making friends perhaps.
Yeah, sure.
Girlfriend हो जाए तो बहुत बढ़िया बात है. That's
मेरी आज तक नहीं बनी.
Oh,
disclaimer.
You were too busy.
I was, and happily so.
Yes, so this early sort of clarity.
Yeah.
You're talking about you have to register for a TED talk. ये
Of
ऐसे ही तो नहीं आ जाता है ना, एकदम से आ गया. और you must have thought this through, and this clarity at that age. Tell us more about this, because how you kind of approach this, because there's a method
Sure,
to it. It's
of
not
course,
madness, right?
Of course. So yeah, after the book came out, and as I mentioned, it went on to get a lot of acclaim and appreciation internationally. That is when I was invited for the first event, basically. And when I was there, all of my fellow speakers, who I still look up to so much, they are my mentors truly. They were in their 60s or 70s or 80s. They were like renowned politicians or academicians or actors or sportsmen and whatnot. And I was 17. I was basically having and this is a true fact, my first TED Talk event, my first public speaking event was scheduled right in between of my chemistry board's examination and my physics board's examination.
Oh, good.
That is genuinely how it was. I'm not making this up. So anyway.
अब हम नंबर तो नहीं पूछेंगे क्या आए थे क्या नहीं आए थे.
No, अच्छे आए थे. 91% आ गए थे.
Very nice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's more than nice, by the way.
For me at least. So anyway, that was how the scenario was. Now in that moment, I saw that all of my fellow speakers, they are experienced, they are renowned personalities, but the moment the spotlight came on me and the camera was focused on me, I became aware of a fact. Like I know that awareness is going to be there for the rest of my life, that from this point onwards, every word that I'm going to utter, whether I write it or I speak it or I verbalize it, it is going to positively impact millions upon billions of people in this generation and even beyond. I'm sure about it. So I think that sort of positive acknowledgement of genuinely wanting to utilize my words and my voice to create that inspiration, to create that positive impact for the entire world, for generations to come. I think that registration, that acknowledgement that you were talking about, it matters a great deal. And definitely I became aware of it at a young age, and this is something which I always encourage my fellow youngsters about as well.
Awesome. I mean, this is so inspiring, because I believe that learning can come in all shapes and sizes.
Of course.
And in any form, and from anybody. Across the globe. I think so. But this learning itni jaldi hona, I mean, I'm still digesting all of this, but I'm sure that people who will watch and kind of listen to this will also acknowledge what it takes. And it takes a certain dedication and consistency to do this. It could be writing, it could be reading, it could be speaking, anything. Tell us the kind of intersection. This intersection of speaking, writing, reading, everything that you do, and even the online, sort of you have to be consistent with it. I see that you keep kind of, you are at it. You are a creator, right? In more ways than one. So this entire ecosystem, walk us through it. How you kind of, maybe structure your day or something like that, because it's important to break it down.
Of course. So for me personally, it is something that, I mean, if I'm talking about a schedule as such, I cannot be specific about it, because there are days when I'm writing for the entirety. There are days when I'm delivering talks and sessions, or I'm busy in filmings like these for the majority of the part, whereas writing scripts or working on stories in the evening, and then delivering workshops about guiding youngsters of how they can also write their stories and stuff like that. So it is always evolving, always in a positive direction. I try to take it. However, the intersection that you're talking about, I think that is a very interesting keyword even, which I hope our audiences today will register, they will make a note of it, that there is and there always can be an intersection of the multiple passions that you have. I think at times people think that if they are genuinely passionate about something, that is the only thing that they should invest their time and effort in, which is something that shouldn't be a restriction for you. You cannot call your creativity as a restriction. You have to consider it as something which liberates you. something which genuinely inspires you to do more as well. The more I write stories, the more inspired I become to deliver talks and sessions. The more I come on stage and deliver talks and sessions or guide the youngsters, the more inspired I feel to work on scripts as well, which can be used while utilizing the experiences that I have while interacting with those youngsters, with those audiences.
Can you give us a specific example? Because I mean, I don't say it directly ever, or our team never says it directly in terms of content. That for example, books or content in general, maybe a Netflix series or something like that.
Sure.
Is there a specific thing that you feel, an example where you kind of got inspired and it showed up clearly?
Game of Thrones.
Okay,
I can give you an answer for it. I can give you a straight away answer. A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, and then the subsequent Game of Thrones series, which, by the way, has nothing to do with what I'm writing. I mean, that is a fantasy fiction. That is a high fantasy. And I am writing stories that are more rooted in the real world, with the real, stories and accounts and people, for that matter.
अब देखो comment section में ना लोग बोलेंगे Game of Thrones तो सब real, people who are in the universe they are like, this is reality.
Yeah, the dragons do exist.
Yes.
Happened. At least I hope so.
This happened. I'm like that with the Matrix. Okay.
Okay.
Like
all
this
right.
Happened.
I'm yet to check it out. I mean, I know it is something that I should have.
It's a millennial thing.
Okay.
You just missed it by some years. Okay. So in our generation, it was the Matrix and all those things. But anyways, they tried to revive it, but it didn't work out. But so with Game of Thrones and you were saying
exactly with Game of Thrones, what happened was. It is a narrative which has a central topic, the Iron Throne, of course, but then it has a lot of characters around it. It has a lot of arcs around it. In the book series, if we are talking, there are, for the very least, 100 named characters who have a lot of POVs and whatnot. In the television show, of course, a smaller bunch, but still a lot of perspective. In the first book that I authored, which was A Celebration Tribulation, it followed the journey of these three individuals, three members of a family, mother, father, and their young daughter. The young daughter is suffering through a certain ailment, and how their parents, within the very short span of time that is basically left in her journey in her life, they try to make it the best that it possibly can be. That is what the book was about. Now, this is where the inspiration comes into play. From the moment I watched Game of Thrones or I read George's works, I became inspired by the fact that the topics can be central, but the perspectives have to be multiple. The perspectives that are talking about a certain subject matter or any theme even in a book for that matter, at least for me personally when I'm writing it or reading it, they have to be multiple. They have to be more than just one. You cannot talk about the pandemic, which by the way is the topic of my second book, while only talking about one of the perspectives of it. Even though, the book that I went on basically getting inspired by wasn't something that I wrote exactly something like, but it was definitely a narrative which gave me a clarity about why it is important to have that multiplicity of perspectives when you're writing something. And that is how it is.
Yash, let's talk about Blisters from the Battle, because I read it and it was quite impactful. I didn't think that you were capable of, making it so, I didn't think that you would be able to kind of bring out the essence of war. Let's call it that. It was very visual, which is, I think the challenge for most books based on, this genre especially.
Certainly.
I mean, we have watched the amazing, movies and series. I mean, whatnot, 1917 and, all these movies, and but the challenge with books is that replicating that on paper is huge. It's like creating Marvel movies on paper with war, because it's a very POV kind of thing, and I could feel that I was in the midst of if there is something happening, I'm like, okay, this is happening, a soldier is kind of injured or whatever, all those things are happening. And the lovely part was that the protagonists were the center of attention.
Yes.
Which was something which was very cool for me.
It was a common family. It was a family of commoners, ordinary people.
Yeah. So tell us more about this kind of a bit about what's happening in the book.
Sure.
And the protagonist in particular. I mean, although I feel that there are multiple here.
There are.
But in general, can you tell us a bit more?
Yes, sure. So, Blisters of the Battle is a book which, of course, right now when we look at the news, there is a lot that is happening geopolitically.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So, it connects very well with it. I wouldn't call it a representation of the same as such, but it certainly strikes a chord on the same level.
But aren't wars all the same?
Exactly. I mean, I was coming on to that key. The book is inspired by so many wars and battles that we have seen in our history that we're aware of. And of course, many of which might be fought in future as well, which would have the similar implications, which can have the similar situations. And I think that is what I tried to encapsulate through this book as well, that regardless of which war we are talking about, which battle we are talking about, the result is pretty similar. The implications, especially on the common people, the ones who are talked about and written about the least in these wars and battles, that remains to be the same. Now, in this book in particular, we have the Partly family, which consists of 2 young daughters, their parents, and a grandmother. And the journey of the book basically takes place over the course of only a single night. The entire book covers only the span of a single night, and how these family members are pulled apart in these 5 different directions, horrendous directions, and their individual journeys. They're coming back together, but not in the same way as one would expect. A mystery, a certain mystery which basically looms from the very first page of the book and let's say comes to fruition in the very last page, but in a very disastrous and in a very harrowing manner, all of which points at the singular point that when there are wars, when there are battles, the common people suffer the most. They are the ones who are sacrificing the most, they are the ones who are losing the most, and they are the ones who are talked about the least. So that is what the book primarily focuses on. Now, when I talk about the visualization, this is something which I am very fortunate, and I feel very much glad to know that all of the readers who read not just this book of mine, but even the previous ones as well, they always share this positive feedback that, we could visualize your book. We could see it in our eyes. There was like a movie that was going on in our mind when we were reading your book. And that is something which trust me, I deliberately try to make sure of, because when I am writing a book or a story, I write it with the perspective of writing a script as such, like a movie script or a television script, because if I feel visually connected with a certain movie that I'm watching, then I want that to be the case with the books that I write as well. And I think that visualizable immersiveness in a story helps the readers in connecting with the story as well.
And I think it was very easy for me to kind of get immersed in this because first of all, it was crisp. It didn't beat around.
No, it strikes. Like, it strikes hard.
All
on
of a sudden, you're
is.
bang. Like it's in a video game, you're just bang in the middle of everything. You're playing PUBG or whatever, Fortnite, and you are in the middle of it. And then you are there. You need to do stuff.
Because otherwise, that is how wars are. If you talk about it,
you'll die.
Yeah,
simple as that.
In wars, there is no beating around the bush, right?
Yes.
So the same has to happen with the books as well. Exactly.
And also, I think I mentioned it to you earlier as well, but it read a lot like a graphic novel for me. And I'm a huge graphic novel addict, and I picked up a couple from here as well. I think the one I picked up from 1984.
Okay.
And that's something like I never imagined that 1984 would be in that format. And another one was Moss, about the Nazis, and that was very interesting. So again, it struck me when I was reading the book that perhaps it could be made into a graphic novel, and it could be made an even easier read for some people who just love the format. Because then we can kind of look at the visuals and experiences it even more. So just an idea.
I am definitely writing out that suggestion after the filming. I assure you of it.
I think it would be very cool, and it could be quite edgy as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And not that it is not here. The edge is also here, but graphic novels are just cooler. I mean,
I'll keep that as a suggestion for sure.
Yeah. So tell us about this when people are suffering
Yeah.
during this time, and of course, as this is a book, but so much has happened, as you mentioned. And so why do these people get ignored? Because these are people who are just kind of, they are in the midst of it and they are suffering.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. People are, now even the journalists dance. We have seen during the Ukraine and, the war, the coverage was ridiculous in some countries at least. And I was like, so what's happening? Why are they just kind of shutting them out? Did you think about this while writing the book?
Of course. I certainly thought about it. I mean, that was one of the reasons behind writing this book as well as all the other books that I've worked on. Even if we, for example, talk about Pandemic 2020, which itself was a battle.
Yeah.
Itself, it was a war.
a battle.
And
Totally.
When I was writing the book, it was April 2020. It was actually one of the first books that ever came out on the COVID-19 pandemic. It has set various records as well for the
I
same.
didn't know that because
Yeah.
when I hosted someone who had written, they were doctors,
Yeah.
3 doctors who had written about the coronavirus.
Yes.
I don't know if you know about that book, but I thought that it was the first one.
Yeah, so this is a fiction novel.
Fiction,
yeah,
fiction
fiction
novel.
novel becomes like a whole
that is
different
non-fiction.
category.
That is non-fiction.
Yeah, so it was one of the first few that were basically released in the market.
Okay.
And it was the very initial phase of the coronavirus outbreak. So, of course, there was a lot of uncertainty about it too. Now, coming back to how it relates with this story and the common people, in the book Pandemic 2020, we come across the story of 4 individuals in 4 different countries. Okay. There is a helpless doctor in the US. There is a stranded traveler in Italy. There is a poor boy in China. And then there is an ambitious journalist in India.
Okay.
And how these 4 individuals, though they are in different countries, are facing the same singular villain, that is the COVID-19 pandemic, the same war, the same battle, and the futilities of it as well, in the very similar ways, but also contrastingly different, it appears. And all of these are common people. All of these are genuinely ordinary people who are just trying to survive through the pandemic, not even, let's say, thrive from the same.
Yeah.
So the agenda, whenever I'm writing a book, is to basically illuminate those stories that are either unheard or are not properly talked about, or are not given representation without the unnecessary fluff or sensationalization, as we like to call it. Trust me, even when you read a book like this, though it doesn't sensationalize something that doesn't need to be so, it still is interesting. I can assure you about it. It still can be interesting to read the truth, to read the facts, provided that they are delivered in a visualizable manner.
We can go into marketing, and marketing is everything.
Exactly.
Also, do you think when you talk about these issues on the platforms that you speak on, like you have spoken in the UN as well?
Yes, in the 75th anniversary event.
So these platforms, a lot of people speak on these platforms. But what is your personal opinion that is the message delivered? Do they kind of pay heed to this? What I can understand what you're trying to say through the books, because someone who has read the book will understand that what you're trying to say. But what is your opinion on that?
See, the feedbacks that I receive for my books in particular, I mean, if I'm talking about
Not
my
about the
own
book,
individual
not
experience,
about the book. In general, the message that you deliver,
Yes.
are they listening to it or just hearing it?
As far as I can speak about my experience, there is a conversation that starts after we are mentioning it, after we are talking about it. And as I said, that has always been one of the reasons to talk about these subject matters, or even youngsters in particular, if we talk about it. Why am I speaking about the youngsters? Why am I speaking about literature? Because if there is something that I know needs to be talked about more, at least I'm kickstarting that conversation. And if I'm seeing that, the conversation is continuing after it, that is only when I amplify the narrative about it or the commentary on the same. So I think in that way, I would definitely say that yes.
Because you get
positively, that
real-time
is the
feedback.
case.
That's why
Of course,
I'm asking.
of course.
Also, a बहुत ही बड़ा मुद्दा है.
Sure.
Reading and writing habit in teens. Okay.
Sure.
That's something not even our team has cracked. Okay. We have been working for 7 years, and we have not been able to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
What are they thinking? What do they want to read? I mean, I know fantasy is a huge thing in that kind of segment, what is your kind of, would you like to add to this? Like,
Yeah.
how can we kind of improve this entire scenario?
Exactly. So to answer this question, let us look at the root cause first of all कि youngsters read क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं. And answer बहुत ही simple है कि अगर आज
Youngsters,
से
you mean वही 13 और वो वाला जो
the young ones
12-13 तक तो
in
मतलब
general
yeah.
जो बहुत ही young ones हैं उनका अगर हम लोग बात कर रहे हैं, let us look at it this way. आज से 50 साल पहले या 100 साल मान लेते हैं, just a hypothetical example, all that there was to genuinely feel entertained were comic books or books in general, or I mean, of course, there might have been visual content as well. Easily available जो था, वो हमारे पास reading material ही था. आज के ज़माने में कई घरों में ऐसा होता है कि reading material ही सबसे कम होता है.
I know.
And visual content ही majority में होता है.
I've seen more bars in drawing rooms than bookshelves.
Exactly. So, I mean, to comment on that, my first suggestion would be the fact कि हम लोग इस बात को acknowledge करना शुरू करें कि जो आज के youngsters हैं, I think they are growing up in a scenario where they are very much into convenience, they are into comfort. Like मैं आपको एक बहुत ही simple सी बात बताना चाहूँगा, एक book को read करने में effort लगता है. ये fact है.
Totally.
When you are reading a book, you have to make the effort to visualize it. Okay, you are giving me the positive feedback कि in my book you were able to visualize it. But is that the case with all the books that you read? No. It is not, right?
It's like 1 out of say, 10. Maybe.
Even though you are an avid reader, you are an avid reader, and then too that is the case. So imagine the issue with those youngsters who are not avid readers, and then they are being asked to पढ़ो. तो उनको तो यही लगता है ना कि इससे बेहतर तो ये कि हम लोग 2 टेलीविजन शोज देख के ही इंस्पायर हो लेंगे या फिर 2 मूवीज देख के ही हम लोग थोड़ा सा लर्न कर लेंगे, which by the way is also storytelling. I respect it, I appreciate it, and I want to explore it also by the way. But अभी जब हम लोग बुक्स की बात करते हैं तो यहाँ पे जो एक रूट कॉज है, primarily why the youngsters are not reading, that comes from the fact कि youngsters want to be in a zone of convenience जहाँ पे उनको effort करना नहीं पड़ रहा है इमेजिन करने के लिए.
It's like
they are able
Uber.
to see it. Yeah, they're able to see it. That is more than enough for them. If they have to read it every single word and then imagine it, वो उनके लिए थोड़ा extra effort हो जाता है.
And what about the audible format? Does it work?
Yes, that is what I was coming on. तो जब हम लोग बात करते हैं कि आखिर हम लोग इन यंगस्टर्स या फिर जो युवा हैं हमारे उनमें इस रीडिंग की हैबिट को कैसे डेवलप कर सकते हैं, आई थिंक द फर्स्ट एंड फोरमोस्ट सजेशन दैट आई पर्सनली वुड लाइक टू गिव इज टू perhaps not only focus on the alternatives that we have, but try to encourage the youngsters to at least check out the alternatives. Because क्या होता है कि अगर आपको पता है कि there is a kid who is not that much into reading but they are into stories, maybe if you suggest them to check out the audiobooks about some renowned narrative and something like that, they might become slightly inspired or even intrigued to just check out the paperback as well. Alternatively, there are book club discussions, जैसे कि यहाँ पे Booknerds पे we are talking about writing in literature, right? So when youngsters or the kids get to listen about it all, when they get to hear about it, when they get to check it all out, भले हम लोग book club discussions की बात करें, literary discussions की बात करें, तो उनको ऐसा लगता है कि okay, there is something that I might want to check out. अगर हम लोग reading को सिर्फ और सिर्फ reading की activity से ही push on करते रहेंगे, trust me when I say this, the youngsters will not do it. हम लोगों को कुछ ऐसे ऑल्टरनेटिव्स उनके सामने रखने पड़ेंगे कि उनको लिटरेचर की तरफ सबसे पहले इंटरेस्ट जागे, फिर वो भले ही रीडिंग को अपना एक पैशन बना ले. सो आई थिंक वी नीड टू एम्फसाइज मोर ऑन द पावर ऑफ लिटरेचर एंड स्टोरी टेलिंग, वेदर वी डू दैट through audiobooks, through book club discussions, through book reports, जिनके बारे में हम लोग अपने youngsters को encourage कर सकते हैं कि सिर्फ पढ़ो मत, but एक reason के साथ पढ़ो. Have an agenda, write something about it, give us your commentary on what you felt about this story.
Maybe a journal or something.
Exactly. What are your views on it? So yeah, that would be my take. Ki let us not emphasize on how much it can be an obligation to read a book. Let us emphasize on how wonderful it can be to go through a story. To visualize a narrative, whether it is in the written form या फिर किसी alternative में भी, ताकि eventually they become inspired about literature as a whole.
And I think there is a churn. It's happening, but I guess this particular segment, the YA segment,
yes,
वो बोला जाता है YA, although I don't agree with it, but ठीक है. It's fine. So that is a major area of concern.
Yeah.
And you're right, the suggestions that you have given, maybe we need to kind of also make it an experience for the kids.
Exactly.
And lead by example, right?
Yeah.
I mean, आप खुद ही मतलब, you know, it is
बिल्कुल,
like
I am
scroll
definitely
करो.
going to
If
work
we are
on it.
scrolling Instagram all the time, my kid will also scroll Instagram, right? It's as simple as that. Anyway, so yeah, I wanted to conclude the podcast with something which I really appreciate about you, the speaking engagements that you do. Okay, walk us through in brief, you know, the prep you have, because it's so scary, this entire process.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about that. You know,
All right, sure. So whenever I'm preparing for even, let's say, a talk of mine or a session of mine, or when I'm guiding the youngsters
Okay.
About how to build up their communication skills, for which I also deliver masterclasses and workshops, there is this mantra which I always talk about. Actually, मैंने इसके बारे में एक जोश टॉक भी डिलीवर की है.
Okay.
And it goes like this. So I have a question for you first of
Okay.
all. बहुत ही सिंपल है.
हाँ.
कितनी फिंगर्स दिख रही हैं यहाँ पे?
अभी तो 4 ही दिख रही है.
थंब को भी काउंट कर लेते हैं.
5.
5 हो गए, राइट? 1 2 3 4 5.
Yes.
Content,
Okay.
clarity, creativity, connectivity, and confidence. Now, if you are able to work on these 5 pillars, this is what your communication skill actually stands upon. If you're able to master these 5 pillars, then a fist is formed, जो कि एक कह सकते हैं अपने अराउंड आपको अगर बैरिकेड या वॉल जैसी कोई फील होती है whenever you are trying to speak because of anxiety or introversion, this fist will definitely be able to break it down. एंड जब हम इन 5 पॉइंटर्स की बात करते हैं, टू बी वेरी ब्रीफ अबाउट इट, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल वर्क ऑन द कंटेंट. आप क्या बात बोलना चाह रहे हैं, आपको उसके बारे में प्रॉपर नॉलेज है भी कि नहीं. लाइक इफ आई एम राइटिंग अ बुक अबाउट द वॉर और द COVID-19, आई नीड टू प्रॉपरली एंड थॉरली रिसर्च अबाउट इट, द कंटेंट. सेकेंड कम्स द क्लैरिटी. द वे इन विच यू आर स्पीकिंग हैज टू बी अंडरस्टैंडेबल. लाइक फॉर एग्जाम्पल, अगर आप एक बनावटी एक्सेंट बना के बात कर रहे हैं, जैसे कि हमारे कई सारे दोस्त करते हैं, हमको जनरल में देखने को मिलता है, क्या वो बातें हमको समझ में आती हैं? नहीं आती, राइट? बट जब अगर एक इंसान अपने उच्चारण की स्पष्टता पे काम करता है, यानी कि क्लैरिटी ऑफ प्रोनाउंसिएशन पे काम करता है, दैट इज व्हेन द लिसनर्स एक्चुअली आर एबल टू अंडरस्टैंड इट एज वेल. दैट इज व्हेन दे आर एबल टू ग्रास्प व्हाट द स्पीकर इज ट्राइंग टू से. Thirdly comes the point of creativity. Now, whenever you are speaking something, you have to present your unique voice, the uniqueness about how you perceive that topic, rather than something जो कि आपने किसी और को बोलते हुए सुना है. आपका personal take उस पे क्या है? That becomes the creativity of your speaking. Then comes the point of connectivity. बात करते समय हमेशा आई कॉन्टैक्ट मेंटेन करिए, बॉडी लैंग्वेज को थोड़ा सा बना के रखिए स्ट्रॉन्ग, हैव अ स्ट्रॉन्ग पोस्चर एंड अ स्ट्रॉन्ग स्टैंस, बिकॉज ट्रस्ट मी दैट कॉन्फिडेंस इज ट्रांसलेटेड इनटू योर वर्ड्स एज वेल. Speaking of which, we have the king of it all, the confidence itself. Now, confidence कैसे build-up करना है, इस पे हर एक इंसान का अपना व्यू पॉइंट हो सकता है. I'm not going to, agree or disagree with that. But for me personally, the confidence comes from your authenticity.
Okay.
When you are speaking, being yourself rather than mimicking somebody else or impersonating somebody else, that is when you feel the most confident. क्योंकि अगर आप किसी और को मिमिक कर रहे हैं तो आप बस उन्हीं के स्टैंडर्ड्स को मीटअप करना चाहेंगे. बट जब आप अपने आप को ही प्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं एज हु यू आर, इवन दो शायद आपका एक्सेंट बहुत अच्छा ना हो, प्रोनाउंसिएशन बहुत ही क्लियर ना हो, इवन एट टाइम्स अगर आपकी वोकैबुलरी भी बहुत रिच ना हो, बट यू आर बीइंग हु यू आर, you are sharing your experiences and you are being joyous about it. Trust me, that is where the confidence comes from. So yeah, I guess that is what the communication skills are supposed to be all about.
That was a masterclass, by the way, and for free. So okay, guys. So, बाकी details के लिए, you have to kind of sign up for the masterclass.
Exactly.
Okay? सब कुछ नहीं मिलेगा. Also, check out the book Blisters from the Battle on Amazon. It's everywhere, and you can also reach out to Yash online. And
Absolutely.
he's on Facebook, Instagram, you're there, and LinkedIn also?
Yes.
LinkedIn also. And so reach out to him, tell him about the book, and you can also kind of, interact with him.
Absolutely.
I
Always a
you
joy.
answer online.
I certainly do, and it is always a delight.
Great. Thank you so much for being on the Booknerds podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was truly a joy.
This is actually, the most out of the box thing for us, because, I am connected to you for a while now, but we didn't speak at all. So it's amazing. The last bit about, how you kind of, develop your confidence and, how to deliver content. It's priceless. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was truly a joy.
Yeah. Yash, we have a little something for you. I hope you can
Thank
find
you.
some space for it in your,
Absolutely.
reading or writing space.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Love it.
Thank you for being on the Booknerds podcast.
Glad to be here.
And we have something from Dehradun, all the way from Dehradun,
Okay.
because Booknerds is based out of Dehradun, and
All right.
this is the most famous rusk ever.
All right.
And,
I definitely check it out with my family.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
thank you so much. Thank you.
But
for
eat it within a month. It gets
I'll eat it within a day. Don't worry
Awesome.
about it.
So it's Eloras. They haven't sponsored this. We just love them.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.